appreciate everyone for being here at this time, especially our facilitators today, Dr. Tunde Adegbola, Dr. Ignatius Ezeani, and soon to be Dr. Oluwaseun David Adepoju. It's such an opportunity, it's such a great privilege to be here on this March webinar of the African Researchers Network. So I'm just going to introduce what we have, what ARN is about before we go into the event for today. So ARN is African Researchers Network, and it is a place where we are beginning to redefine knowledge generation and the storage of knowledge in Africa. Like we have this idea of making sure, we've always had this issue with Africa that knowledge has been passed down the line through word of mouth, and then that get distorted in the over time. So now we are really getting back on track to be sure that, of course, there is a lot of things that have been written. So now we are trying to really play our own part in that, to contribute our own to that, to be sure that knowledge from Africa is preserved and it can be passed down the generations before that are coming after us. So we do this by organizing webinars from time to time. We identify people who are doing very interesting research relating to Africa and all that. So in the past, we've had a lot of events. There was a time in October 2020 we had UK laws, policing and immigrants in context. So, like I was talking about the objectives to enhance collaboration and networking, to share information on job opportunities and life generally in the UK. Of course, now that has expanded greatly to other parts of the world right now. So to discuss publication and ongoing research, to improve our visibility within the university community, and even everywhere knowledge is appreciated, and to bring African insights into interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary approaches and all that. So, and that's why here you can find scientists, people into the humanities, yeah, social sciences, everything. We have everybody coming together for a cross-fertilization of ideas. So like I was trying to talk about the fact that we had a lot of events in the past, which have been quite fascinating indeed. So we also have newsletters. We have newsletters in English, French, and Russian from time to time, because we have a publication committee that sees to whatever webinar we have, we have people who pull them together, and they transcribe whatever video recordings we have, so that whatever we share, they do not just disappear like that, but we have them in written form. We also have a YouTube channel where all these things are posted. So in the past we've had events like between researchers in and on Africa. So we also had this African agency in humanistic studies. We had UK laws, I mentioned that earlier. We had in December, we had taken scientific and engineering research, white Jesus, black devil, something on theology. Then interestingly, I was part of the facilitators for the last webinar we had in February, talking about our knowledge of the universe, the African perspective. So for today's event, I think I want to hand over to Augustine to continue.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emmanuel Dancy. So for today's event, we are having three great giants in the field of machine learning, computer science, and also in literary studies, as well as technology research. And we have Dr. Tunde Adegbola, who is the founder of TIWA Systems and the executive director of African Language Technology Initiatives. We have Dr. Ignatius Ezeani, and then we also have David Adepoju. So I will start with Dr. Tunde Adegbola, and I will give his reader's biography, and then we will proceed to his talk. Then we'll be able to have the biography of other speakers as we take them one by one. So as I've said before, Dr. Tunde is presently the Director of African Language Technology Initiatives, and he completed a bachelor degree in electrical engineering at the University of Lagos and later specialized in broadcast technology. And he subsequently obtained a master's degree in computer science from the University of Wales and completed a PhD in information science with specialization in human language technology at the University of Ibadan. As a researcher in human language technology, he works in adapting ICT to make them unstable in African languages. He partnered with Microsoft to localize Microsoft Windows and Office to Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba, the most spoken Nigerian languages, beginning with Windows Vistas and then to Windows 8. And he has always been in collaboration and helping Microsoft to do such localization. And he teaches artificial intelligence as an adjunct at the University of Lagos, University of Ibadan, Ape Babalola University in Ado-Ekiti, and all of them in Nigeria. And he was a research fellow at Innovative Computing in Cleveland, Ohio. And I can keep reading about and talking about Dr. Adegbola, but you can read that on Wikipedia. You can just Google Dr. Tunde and you will get him up. So I hand over to Dr. Tunde to take over for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is my screen on? Can you see my screen?
Not yet, sir.
Maybe somebody is, because I've put my screen on at the moment. Would I have to share again?
Can you try that again, sir?
Okay, let me try to share again. Is it on now?
Yes, sir.
Can you see me?
It's on.
Yes, sir.
It's on, okay. Thank you. Just put it on display mode. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, my name is Tunde Adegbola. Our discussion this afternoon is on man-machine interaction and the language problem in Africa. I am hypothesizing that there is a language problem in Africa at the moment because of the emerging implications of the use of language in technology. Computers, when they came onto the scene, they were used in highly specialized environments by high specialists. So at that point in time, computer skills were highly specialized skills, and those who use computers learned the language of computers. But with time, the computer moved away from these highly specialized areas, moved onto the desktops of professionals. And at that point, computer skills became professional skills. You apply for a job as an accountant, it became mandatory for you to be able to speak the language of spreadsheets. And at that point, computer skills became professional skills. But the computer didn't stay on the desktop of professionals. It moved onto the streets, in the ATM that you have in banks, in the devices you held in your pockets. And everybody now had to be able to communicate with the computer. So at this point now, computer skills have become life skills. And anybody that does not have computer skills is bound to live a compromised life. And it is on that basis that I am positing that there might be a problem with language in Africa. Let me start by talking about the information age. We find ourselves now in the information age, which is an age in which information, more than anything else, determines the dynamics of human societies. Manuel Castells, one of the most, the leading lights in the sociology of the information age, describes two ideas of space. It talks of the space of spaces, of places rather, space of places and space of flows. The space of place is the space we are traditionally used to, the space defined by geography. But the space of flow is the space through which information flows. And that space of flows, which Manuel Castell presents as the alternative space, is the space that matters in the information age, because that's the space that that defines your capacity to inform and your capacity to inform. And that capacity to be informed and the capacity to inform is what will determine your status in the world we live in today. It's all about information flows. But what is information? In a layman's sense, I'll present information as the basis on which decisions are made and actions are taken. Every time we make a decision or we take an action, it is because we have based such a decision or some action on some information. Information takes its root on data, which is just a representation of certain states of data. Somebody is 2 meters tall. That is a representation of a state of data, or state of reality, and that is data. Somebody is 10 years old is a representation of a state of reality, and it is data. Now, when you process data, you provide context for data, data then becomes information, and you are then able to take decisions, make decisions and take actions on that. Now, when you combine information with rules for its appropriate application, then we are moving along the continuum of data through information to knowledge. You will then find that data and information depend largely on encounter and recall. If you say you have information at the level of data, then it is because you have encountered a situation that presents that data to you. And your ability to use that data or the information that derives therefrom at a later date depends on your capacity to recall the data. But there's a problem with that. The first problem is that our mental capacity is not enough to store all the information we need. And two, there are certain information you will prefer to get without encountering the situation that gives you the information. That may be because the situation is not clement. I'm sure nobody wants to learn that a snake bite is poisonous by getting a snake bite. You want to find some other ways of knowing that. And that is where knowledge comes in, because knowledge now enables information without encounter. With knowledge, you are able to derive unknown information from known information, and that makes it possible for you to know without encounter and recall. Now, what is language? Language is a system of representation of reality based on the experiences of a given culture. It is the substrate on which all information is built. In short, without language, there cannot be information. Excuse me to use an illustration from my language, Yoruba. The Yoruba word for language is ede. And that word ede comes, the noun ede comes from a verb, de, which means to bind. In the same way, the Yoruba word for think is ro. Ro is to think. Now, ede is the word for language, and ero is the word for thought. Ede is the word for language because language is perceived as the binder of thought. It is language that binds thought together, that makes it concrete, that makes it usable, and puts it in such a way that we can project with it, we can prognosticate with it, we can use available information to derive unknown information through the capacity of language to bind thought together. So without language, there can be no information. Please follow me. I'm trying to establish this nexus between information and language. Let me quickly take a short detour and talk about colonization and globalization. Colonization is a process in which a different nation, a different people, a different culture, a different power takes over the space, the values, the resources of another, and takes rules and dictates how to use it. If you look at it carefully, based on how I explained Manuel Castells, how he presents the dichotomy of spaces, you will see that colonization can be said to be about the space of place. Colonization is taking over a people's geography, taking over their resources, taking over their physical resources. But globalization is about the space of flows. The space of flows, which Manuel Castells describes as that space which determines the dynamics of society today. So whilst colonization is about the space of place, globalization is about the space of flows. Now, I am positing that globalization without adequate language base might become tantamount to colonization of the space of flows. So all we are doing now, talk of the information age, information society, digitization, all these activities we are engaging in, if we do not hold our languages very well, then we might be going into globalization as though a second wave of colonization, even though at this time, a colonization of the space of flow rather than colonization of the space of place. Let me then quickly skip to talk about big data. Big data is the terminology that's now used for data in large volumes, in high velocity, and in wide variety. We talk of the 3 V's of big data. Of course, there are various other ways by which we talk about big data, but it suffices to look at it from these 3 V's: the V of volume, the V of velocity, and the V of variety. Volume in the sense that big data is not just data, but big data, really, really big data characterized by large volumes of data. Big data also is characterized by high velocity of data, in which case the state of the data changes very, very fast. And also the variety of the data is wide. Big data is accumulated naturally by virtue of normal everyday activities. Big data is not the kind of data you say you collect deliberately. You want to perform some experiments, you want to engage in some study, you go to store data, you go to collect data. No. Big data is a byproduct, is an accumulation of byproduct of everyday activities. activities which will take place anyway, whether you want to collect data or not. And because it's large volume, high velocity, and wide variety, it challenges storage space, it challenges processor speeds, and it presents a lack of structure that makes it not too easy to deal with it. Even though we may look at the volume, the velocity, and the variety from a point of view of challenges, we need to realize that the volume and the variety that it presents comes with very, very wide coverage, to the extent that there's hardly anything in the circumstances that the data represents that might not have emerged. In the case of language data, for example, there's hardly any basic rule of language that big data would not have accommodated and which can be probably easily or more difficultly extracted from this unstructured data because of the wide variety. Now, artificial intelligence is based to a large extent on now the availability of big data, on fast processors, on capacity to develop algorithms that will make the processing of unstructured data possible to extract useful information from unstructured data. But also, the developments in ICT, and in particular in the area of artificial intelligence, are making it imperative for us as humans to communicate through machines. You and I are communicating now, and we are achieving this communication through a machine or through a plethora of machines. But also beyond communicating through machines, we are now under pressure to communicate with machines too. If you ever used ATMs, then you are communicating with a machine. If you are dealing with frequently asked questions on an issue, you are communicating with machines. If you are doing a Google search, you are communicating with a machine. And in each of these, there are efforts to make it possible for you to be able to communicate in a language not too different from the language, the natural language which you speak naturally. But that is because, to some extent, you have become conformed. You have started speaking a kind of stylized language that makes it easy for the computer to understand you. The ultimate in man-machine interaction is for human beings to use the natural language that they have and communicate with machines. It is said that the computer age will truly arrive when machines learn to deal with us humans on our own terms. And machines dealing with us humans on our own terms will be within with our natural language without having to learn a special computer language. Now, when we talk about man-machine interaction, we are talking of a lot of AI involvement. Now, like I've said before, AI depends on big data. And that is where we seem to have a problem in Africa. In Africa, we seem to engage in what I describe as linguistic gas flaring. Nigerians know a lot about gas flaring because all the gas that comes out of our petroleum production process, we do not harness them. We just burn them off and waste them. And that is profligate, to put it mildly. We seem to do the same thing in our language use, because the colonial legacy languages like English, French, Portuguese, and other, are the languages of administration. They are the language of education, language of officialdom. In short, they are the language of opportunity. So everybody strives to use these languages. For that reason, therefore, African languages are not used in wide enough domains, in domains that will make the use of these languages end up in documentation. You speak to your father in your language and it flares up in air, and there's no documentation to what you have just said. You don't use your language in submitting homework assignments. You don't use your language in conducting legislative discussion, which is by course recorded. You don't use your language in a court proceedings, which is by course recorded. You don't use your language in newspaper publication, which then becomes a kind of a repository of data. And recently I needed to get some data in English, and I went to the New York Times site. I had 100 years of everyday publication of materials in the English language. How much further would you want? I wanted to do the same thing in my own language. The best I saw was a magazine, a weekly newspaper called Alaroye. It is published once a week. For some time, it was available on the internet. It is no more available on the internet now. And it means, therefore, that we are not using our languages in domains that make them end up in documentation. So we therefore need to widen the domains in which we use them, because the domains in which we use our languages at the moment do not leave any trail. And we need to leave trails, because the AI on which man-machine interaction depends, really needs large volumes of data, big data, high volumes of data, fast velocity of data, and wide variety of data. So today in AI, we do a lot in the direction of data-driven artificial intelligence, and it demands a lot of data. So our inability to accumulate big data for African languages is a great disadvantage. This inability to accumulate big data makes development of technologies for man-machine interaction very difficult, extremely difficult, because for us to make machines to be able to use our languages through natural language processing in fashions close to the way we use them, we need large volumes of data. So to reiterate, we therefore need to widen domains of use of African languages. And apart from that, also we need to make deliberate efforts to accumulate data for African languages, so that we can, even if we're not going to get large volumes of data, we'll at least have appreciable volumes of data. Now, there's this talk about the vulnerable hunter. The hunter that goes a hunting without a weapon is usually the target of the hunted animals. Believe it or not, animals know the hunter that is not armed. And if they are going to attack any of the hunters in a trail, they go for the hunter that's not holding a weapon, because that's the weak link. Globalization without adequate language capacity is like going a hunting without a weapon. So Africa may be the weak link in globalization, not because there's something intrinsic in our culture and our way of life that makes us a weak link, but because for some reason or the other, we are not using our languages in wide enough domains that make them end up in documentation towards accumulating big data. So for us in Africa, this is a disadvantage. But the global community will also be a loser, because the global community will be developing theories of cognitive science based on only about 30 similar languages out of about 7,000 languages spoken in the world today. So it is a challenge both for Africa and the global community to ensure that we use African languages in domains in which they end up in documentation and with the capacity to accumulate into big data. But the primary responsibility is on us Africans to ensure that we push our languages to these domains and we ensure that they are used in such a way that they are accumulated for long-term use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Prof. So at this point, Dr. Emmanuel will make a recap of the basic points that have been highlighted, and I'll be able to bring in the second speaker.
Yes, that was such an illuminating talk. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. So from the talk, I was able to get the idea that language is facing some challenges now because of the should I say the ubiquity of technology, the fact that technology is all over the place now. And I also appreciate the fact that computer skills are extremely important these days. Without them, you probably do not belong in this present world. Then I like the idea of the space of spaces and the space of flows, and the fact that the space of spaces has something to do with colonization, while the space of flows is related with globalization. And that if the space of flows are not well, is it well regulated by languages, then it becomes some kind of colonization. Then, and the fact that African languages have been relegated to the background due to colonialism and all that, a lot of talk about big data and artificial intelligence, so it's quite educational. And the importance of language in concretizing thoughts, in making sure that our thoughts are useful and that it binds thoughts together. Thank you so much, Dr. Adegbola, for that insightful talk. So I give the floor back to Augustine to introduce our next speaker.
Very much. And our next speaker for today will be Mr. David Adepoju. And he has his BSc and MSc degrees from the Department of Library and Information Science, University of Ibadan, and is currently undergoing his PhD studies in creative technologies at Auckland University of Technology. His research focuses on social media analytics, open data, technology entrepreneurship, digital society, and electronic governance. So you're welcome, brother.
Thank you, Augustine. Could you give me permission to share my screen? Awesome. Augustine, please, could you share the screen from your end? I think I'm having issues with my Zoom settings. I wouldn't want to waste more time.
Let me open it from here. You can.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. I re-downloaded another app for Zoom and it's acting up. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Adegbola, for a wonderful presentation. The first time I heard your name, I was 18 years old, and I think I've followed your work for a long time, and it's a pleasure to sit down. I think I'm here to learn this evening rather than to be a panelist. Thank you for such an insightful presentation. I'm a Yoruba man, and I know what has been done to the Yoruba language by our parents, by our teachers, and by educational institutions. When we speak in Yoruba, they tell us we are speaking vernacular. And I didn't actually understand that concept until I entered the university. So thank you for being an advocate of African indigenous languages. Today, I'll speak more to, so for me, I just want to cause an intellectual opera for us. I don't count myself as an expert in African indigenous languages or communication, but I think I can speak to technology philosophies and how that affects us as a people and how we lose our language and what can we do to actually prepare ourselves to make African indigenous languages go viral through technology. Next slide, Augustine. So let us philosophize for a minute. It's always very good to look at the epistemology of a term for us to understand the implication of it and application of such a term on other variables. So when we look at technology, we talk about technology every day. And the Greek, we call the foundational word for technology is techni in Greek. And that word means art of doing or art of craftsmanship, which means the next interpretation the Greek philosophers gave to that was imitation. So they believe that a technology takes the imitation of the environment of the developer of that technology. So technology also reflects the nature and the environment of the developer. So whatever machine we have interacted with over time, in English language, the machine takes the imitation and reflects the environment of the developer. When we have people whose computers are programmed in Portuguese language, that takes the imitation of the environment and the uniqueness of the developer. But it is very important for us to understand that the imitation we are talking about is not just limited to the environment itself, but also the language of the developer. And I'm going to tie this with other questions I'm going to be asking us in the next few minutes. Next slide, Augustine. Thank you. So the first question I want to ask us is, what is the Africa's technology philosophy? What is Africa's technology philosophy? It is important that we understand what our philosophy is as a continent and as countries, different countries in Africa. Even though sometimes I do not like talking about different countries in Africa, because when we look at Africa generally, I believe we have a lot of points where we meet and where we can do things together. For Germany, for example, when you say German technology products, they are, their philosophy is that it's durable, it's rugged, is of high quality, and there's high quality assurance in the German technology philosophy. For China, China would say they are building for all kinds of situations and conditions. And that is why they are the biggest country when it comes to frugal innovation in the whole world. Whatever, if you want a phone of $10, they are going to develop it for you in China. They give you what you want, the specs you want, So their own technology philosophies support frugal innovation. And Germany will not do that. So Germany will not accept frugal innovation. They will tell you this is what we class as quality. This is what we classify as quality, and that is what we are going with. This is what we call durability, and that's what we are going with. But China will tell you, okay, we can remove 2000 mbph of the battery. We can, design it the way you want it, as long as that is what you want. For South Korea, their own technology philosophy talks more of efficiency and affordability. They want to give you something that is efficient, it serves the purpose, it won't give you a problem, and you can afford it. That is the technology philosophy of South Korea. So in Africa, or in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zambia, in Malawi, in Botswana, do we have a national technology philosophy? Because every innovation starts from a country identifying what their technology philosophy is. In my first TED Talk in 2017, I spoke on, is Nigeria technologically ready? And some of the experiences that culminated in that topic for me was a very particular one, was when I was doing a master's in technology policy in South Korea. We were asked to check the website of countries for some data points that can classify such nations as good in e-government. And I was very excited, based on all the stories and news I've watched online about Nigeria, moving forward in e-government. And I was surprised that none of those data points we were looking for was on the federal government website. And as at that point in time, the Nigerian government has no national website. They only had the City of Abuja website. And there was no data point we were looking for on that website. And one of the things we were looking for was also if the citizens of that country can actually access government services in the language, in their own indigenous language. I'm sure Nigeria has maybe approximately 500 languages, if not more. And we have the 3 most spoken languages, and none of those, the only language the website was, that you can read that website or access government services was in English language. And it dawned on me that we need to start asking ourselves, little questions before we have big conversations around why the indigenous languages are actually going into extinction. Next slide. Okay, so I did a little research, and I've been doing this research since 2016. I've checked more than 50 government websites. And as far back as 2016, we checked a lot of government websites, including countries that only has maybe 16 indigenous languages. And I was surprised that a lot of countries in Europe actually has all the indigenous languages spoken by indigenes of that country on their website. And each of those language group can actually access government services in their own indigenous language. And this connects back to what Dr. Adegbola said around, using the language to generate repository of data about that language, and the simple thing for me is, even in the website of the government, even in the website of government services, so this one is the Federal Ministry of Health, the one we can see on the left of Nigeria, is only in English language. And I believe when we are talking about technology inclusion, we need to start from, little things like this. When we talk about technology inclusion, which means somebody that cannot read English language, cannot read coronavirus information in Yoruba language on the Federal Ministry of Health website, in 2021. And it is so sad that across all the ministries' websites in Nigeria, and I use the Ministry of Health because it is a very important conversation at the moment. Nigerians who don't speak English or who have not learned the English language cannot actually access government information on coronavirus in Yoruba language, in Hausa language, in Igbo language on the website. It's all in English. Now, this is the one to the right is the Federal Ministry of Health of Tanzania website. And the 2 institutional languages in Tanzania is English and Kiswahili. And when you go on that website, you can actually read everything in Kiswahili, and you can read everything in English. When I was living in South Korea, English is a backup because the Korean language is the main language, including the tap and go technologies in the buses, it's in Korean language. So you do not have a choice than to, learn the language yourself. But there are a few situations where the English language will be there, and there are other platforms where you can access information in all kinds of languages. But the truth is, in order for us to, preserve that language, we class as indigenous and unique to us, we must include those structures in little things like building a website to create a trail of data that we can, record for that language. Now, I've been able to put, so this last one, the one we can see down here, there's a company in Nigeria called Publicier. They also operate in Ghana. They're a content management company by Chidi Uwago and his twin brother. And I was very surprised and impressed that their website can be accessed in different languages. And there are major African languages on their website. You can, Amharic language of Ethiopia, you can do business on their website in Amharic language, in Hausa language, in Igbo language, in Sesotho language. This is a language spoken in some part of South Africa and Lesotho, in Shona language, in Zulu language, in Yoruba language, in Xhosa language, in Kiswahili, in Bosasunda language. These are languages, indigenous languages to Africa, and you can do business freely on their website in these languages. This shows that it is possible, and some organizations, local startups are leading the way, and this is a lesson for even the government of Africa, of nations in Africa, to start infusing indigenous language in little things like building our websites, and also in providing information from the government information system. It is very important, and I think this is one of the foundational issues for us to move forward. So this is the second question I have for us. Next slide, please. Okay, my third question to us is, what is our relationship with the indigenous languages? I remember when I was in secondary school, an uncle of mine came home with his daughter, and my grandmother, who never went to school or learned English, was speaking to the girl in the Yoruba language. And my uncle, as young as I was, I remember that I was very, very angry and disappointed in him. My uncle told my grandmother not to speak to the girl in Yoruba language because it will corrupt her diction or the way she speaks. And then, so to my uncle, the Yoruba language was a vernacular. And the funniest thing is that this my uncle studied Yoruba in Ife, but his daughters are not learning the Yoruba language. They speak English to them at home. And, I've over time discovered that I'm Christian, and when I'm reading the English Bible, there are some inspiration or some rhema that doesn't come to me in the English language until I go to read it in my mother tongue, in the Yoruba language. So as I'm reading the English language, I have my Yoruba Bible beside me, because some deeper understandings cannot come to us in the language of the colonizer. And another concern for me is that even the English language we said we are speaking, many of us are not speaking it well. We are not using it to the highest level of efficiency of the language, while we have abandoned our own language. So our relationship with the language is also very important. I don't understand the scriptures very well until I read it in the Yoruba language sometimes, right? So I did a screenshot here that says the English language threatens the Nigerian native languages. And this is the truth. This is the truth. When I was in primary school, they beat us for speaking Yoruba language. We get beaten for speaking the Yoruba language. And despite the fact that people like us didn't learn English on time, that doesn't make the Yoruba language even helped us to understand the English language better. Many people speak the English language today. They talk in English language. They don't communicate in English language, because communication is when people have understood what you have said and they can reply to you because they've understood what you have said. Many people speak the English language. They just speak it. They are not communicators in that language. And I think your mother tongue helps you to communicate in another language better. So this is the third question I have for us. And I think if we can answer these three questions, we'll begin to build the foundation for mainstreaming the indigenous African languages across all emerging technologies. Finally, I'm doing a research currently, a continental research on blockchain activities. And one of the guys I've interviewed is building a blockchain protocol on the Stellar blockchain for 3 African languages. And it's something I'm really interested in, to see that if we can begin to infuse African indigenous languages in the way we build the 4th industrial revolution technologies, then I think we are on the way to solving some of the issues we have discussed and some of the questions I've asked us. Thank you very much.
So much. That was another bomb. Thank you so much. Um, it's so interesting that it fits very well with what Dr. Adegbola told us, like his talk the first time. Um, thank you for bringing up the issue of technology, philosophies, and all that, because these are real things that actually affect us, that we have to pay attention to. I took note of the idea that technology is basically about imitation. Like, people have learned to, okay, like, you look at a spider building webs, and then you can do something about that. And we see in most vehicles, like aeroplanes and everything, you see them doing streamlining, just like according to the pattern of birds, for efficiency in flight. So, um, then the question of Africa needing a technology philosophy, I think that's very important. And in fact, even at the national levels, we should, for instance, we mentioned Nigeria. What are we exactly known for technology-wise? It would seem to me like it's a technology philosophy is to consume everything every other person is making, and I think that's not interesting at all. So, and we have to begin to ask little questions before the big conversations. Most of the times, we just want to jump into things without, like, looking at our own context to build some of these technologies. So, and being inclusive is quite important. I think it's very heartwarming that at least we can point at certain countries who are not doing so badly. For instance, I like following the South African Parliament. You see them, they speak English, and halfway they have jumped into something like one of their other, I think, 11 languages or so. So I think, but well, if something like that happens in Nigeria, somebody can quickly say, "Oh, what are you talking about?" But, and I'm very sure that in using all those other languages, they already have their ways of making sure people who do not understand the language get to understand, because probably they have interpretations and everything like that. So then, Publicia, I think Publicia, we have to pay some attention to Publicia, because they have seen the future, and they have gone ahead. More firms should come up and do things like that. And it is very fascinating that we have abandoned our languages, and then we do not even speak the language. Or, for instance, parents that don't want their kids to speak vernacular actually teach their children, "I want to poo poo and I want to wee wee," and for them that's English. So I wonder what that is. So I think it's so sad, and we have to retrace our steps. And I am a witness to the fact that learning our own indigenous languages actually helps us to even understand foreign languages better. I did not learn any word of English at home. I'm from Badagry, and we speak Ogu, that some people call Egun. So I spoke Ogu at home. Then I picked up Yoruba around, and I was also taught Yoruba in school. And then I learned English in school also. Well, guess what? Throughout my 6 years in the secondary school, I was the best in English language all the way. And then we had people from places like VI, Lekki, were in school together, and they were not even doing as well as us, the local boys, so to speak. So I think that's very interesting. And your research, your ongoing research is quite interesting too. Talking about blockchain, 3 indigenous African languages. Thank you so much for that. Great talk. It's I'll start looking out for you every time from now on. Thank you.
And we welcome a third speaker, who is the last but not the least, and is going to just give us another bomb shell discussion. And his name is Dr. Ignatius M.E. Ezeani. He's a senior teaching associate at Lancashire University in the UK. He's a computer scientist, a machine learning practitioner, and a data scientist with a PhD in natural language processing, an MSc in advanced engineering, performance engineering, and a BSc first class in computer science from Oka University, University of Oka in Nigeria. His research focuses on tools, method for effective processing of low resources African languages, especially Igbo English machine translation. So we can say we started with machine learning and Yoruba and other forms of translations, linguistic translations that Dr. Adegbola has helped Microsoft to do. Though we're going to the major specific from Igbo machine learning, as well as the software for making natural language computable. So you're welcome, Dr. Ignatius. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. So before I start, I want to thank the first two speakers, Dr. Tunde and Oluwaseun, so very much for covering most of the ground that I need to. Indeed, after listening to your thoughts, I was like, what do I have to say again? So thank you so much. So I do have a couple of slides which I've used for talks like this over some time. So some of the things here may not be directly relevant to what we're saying today, but I'll race through some of them and then see where we'll get from there. So the first thing I want us to look at is the outline of what we're going to say. A good chunk of what needs to be said about the need for us to be involved, to understand what NLP is and possibly be involved in that, has been said by the first two speakers. So the second part will be where I will kind of mention some of the things where we do so far, excuse me, and then invite us to join us to be able to contribute to that. So that's what my talk is going to be about. Like I said, the first part, I'm going to race through a lot of things there because it's more or less already covered. Okay. So NLP is a subfield of AI. I believe you understand that my first, these two speakers before me had made that very clear. And usually when we think about AI, what comes to our mind is some of the things we see in sci-fi movies, all right? But not anymore. I know we are very conversant with this, but not anymore. Today we know that AI has achieved so much in terms of its ability to mimic what human beings do. Okay, so the game of chess, for instance, the deployment in factories and the industries, the help we get from AI in hospitals, in very highly cerebral, intellectually challenging games like Jeopardy and so on, or the game of Go, which Google DeepMind actually made a lot of noise about with their reinforcement system, AI. Okay, and then we have been able to also deploy AI in firefighting and things like that. So in most of these things, we see maybe some physical components. Okay, but AI is more than that now. Although we still aim at getting AI to do most of the things human beings do, we know that AI are, we see AI in our everyday life, like Prof said earlier. When you use the ATM, you see AI. When you Google search anything, you see AI, and so on. And this is made possible because we do have a lot of data and a lot of compute capacity going on now that allows the system to be able to process these huge amount of data very quickly and make sense of it. So we're coming back to that. So when we define AI, we're looking at, because the reason I'm going in this direction is we're going to come back to language. As Prof said, that language is actually the binder of thoughts. Whenever we're thinking about AI, behaving like human being, AI systems behaving like human being, we cannot possibly separate it from the language that human beings speak. And the fact that we're building systems that we want to interface with human beings using human language makes it imperative that we're going to be thinking about how to process human beings better to extract the semantic and syntactic information that we have embedded in those languages. Okay, so there are several ways we look at AI. On the left, for instance, we'll be looking at the human aspects of AI, whether it's thinking or acting like human. Then the other side, we're looking at the rational aspect, whether it's also thinking or acting rationally. And we have different school of thoughts that define that. I'm not going to bore you with that. And then we have a generic definition of AI, which looks at the its ability to study the synthesis and analysis of computational agents that act rationally. Okay, so like Prof said, the reason why we need to keep building these systems that the huge amount of data that we have, the big data is defined it as, with all the V's, the high volume, velocity, and the variety, changing over time in real time, we generate every day, means that we need to be deploying systems that are a bit more efficient in rummaging through all these and getting us what we need. AI moves from rule-based to machine learning, and from machine learning to deep learning architectures that allow you to do that. And so when we are also trying to build systems for natural language processing, we apply these systems at this level. So there are systems for natural language processing we created at the beginning, like simple rule-based part of speech tagging and so on, which are rule-based. And then we moved on to machine learning, and now we're focusing a lot more on deep learning architectures. Okay, these are definitions of machine learning, and I won't bore you with that. The only thing I need to say is that when a computer is in an experience learning how to perform a particular task, we say that it is machine learning. So you normally you are supposed to write a program that does something, but these days you don't necessarily need to do that. What you need to do is to build an architecture that allows the system deployed in a particular scenario to be able to learn from that environment. So for instance, when you mark a particular email as being spam, your system understands that. As you carry on doing that, your system will be able to identify spam emails and move them to the spam box. When you click or select or look at certain items on Amazon, for instance, your system automatically understands that. When you Google stuff, your system understands that. There are all sorts of things going on with machine learning, and that's what we are hoping that we will deploy to NLP to be able to do better. Okay, so we have explained by my first speakers have explained why we need NLP. We need it, like Prof said, we need it to be able to be part of the globalization movement. Okay, and Oluwaseun has also pointed out that if we don't begin to think in this direction, we're not going to have a well-structured philosophy for us to move forward from where we are now. So we have to find a way to process these languages, and then from there we will be able to understand and generate languages that will interface with these devices. And the reason this is also important is that now we have about 7 billion people on this planet, or more, a little more, and we have about 4-point-something billion people that are on the internet, participating on the internet, doing one thing or the other, sending email, doing this Zoom call, and so on. We have about 5-point-something billion devices on the internet. So we actually have more than one device per person on the internet, generating one information or the other. And so if at the end of the day, for us Africans, if it happens that a huge part, 90% sometimes, of the data that we generate on the internet are not English or Spanish or Chinese and all that, and not any of the African languages, or not the language you care about, or not the language we read our Bible with and understand, we are going to lose out in the globalization game. So it's important that we understand this. Human language is very difficult to process. It's ambiguous, it's subtle, it's the representation differ as you move from one domain to the other. The domain could be languages, it could be a specific area like engineering or science or anything. As you move from one domain or the other, you have to begin to recreate rules. Okay, there are so many human languages existing, so you cannot have a silver bullet solution that will solve all the problems in these languages. So, like I said earlier, these are some of the NLP applications that we have. The Google search is a typical NLP application. The sentiment analysis, spam filtering, they belong to a class we refer to as text classification. Machine translation is an obvious one. So many of us here use Google Translate. Question answering is also what we do all the time when we ask Google now or Amazon Alexa, something like that, to questions about the weather or anything we're interested in. Okay, so these things are already existing. They do not exist in our language, but we want them to exist in our language. I'm coming back to some of the things we are doing, we'll be suggesting. Okay, I'm racing through so that I made the 15 minutes mark. So a typical test classification look like this when you have reviews of anything, maybe a hotel or items you bought on the internet and so on. What we want to do in supervised learning, for instance, is to be able to extract these features. I'm going to the basics, which will tell us what our systems are expected to do at the end of the day. And we do not have these texts in our language to be able to do these things. I'm going to the basics. So each of these things that the machine learning or AI architecture will be able to do will need a lot of data in the text that you expect it to do. So you can imagine when people have their reviews in their own language, they set something or they write something in their own language, and you will not be able to process it to be able to say whether they are actually positive or negative and be able to make better decisions about how to serve them better in future. Definitely likely going to miss out in that area. Okay. So so there are components like feature extraction, getting correct labels, machine learning classifier, training using an algorithm to train the model and then eventually getting the model. I won't bore you with that. And that's because we in natural language processing, we try as much as possible to use the context of the words that we are using. I mean, what if Prof will tell us from his work, because I've also followed his work, that there are rules, linguistic rules we apply, but we're trying to allow the system to figure these rules out. And one of the ways we do that is also by looking at the context of each word based on what Fetch told us, okay, that you shall know a word by the company that it keeps. Okay, so we do vectorization. We can build models like word embedding models. We have word embedding, word to vec architecture that help us to do that. But the point I want to bring out from this is that at the end of the day, just applying these things to your system, you will be able to come out with combinations that suggest that certain words that go together will actually be a bit more similar. So, and you see that if you build models like that, you can have, say, dogs, cats, and kittens are in the same place in the domain of the space of the model. Okay, and you can have patterns like this where man is also likely going to be very close to woman, while king is likely going to be very close to queen in the same direction. Okay? And then we have other embedding types, the character, the submodels, and so on. Yeah. The problem also is that if we do not try to bring our own, do not try to bring our own ways of doing these things, some of the biases, Mr. Emmanuel, if you're telling me to stop, I can. Yeah. So some of the biases that are built in today's world will also be built built in the models that we're creating. Am I to stop now, Mr. Emmanuel? I had a lot of
Yes, sir.
slides because I wasn't sure the audience I will be expecting. Given that I was also asked to cover a little bit about the technology.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, there's no problem.
All right.
The point I'm making is that while these slides are available, you can also look at them and ask questions. The point I'm making is that it's important that we get involved so that all the prejudices, racism, marginalization that we have will be able to build systems that will take care of those things. Okay, finally, let me talk a bit about African NLP. Maybe this is the one that will also be a bit more of importance to us. We know that Africa has 30% of the living languages of the world. We know that the participants in NLP as of today are less than 0.1% in terms of the papers that we present. We know that we are not allowed to go to conferences before. Luckily for us, because of COVID, we can also participate in conferences online. We have problem of data, like Prof mentioned earlier. And we created African NLP workshops to allow us to produce our work and at least submit to places and support ourselves to places that we can reach if the big NLP conferences do not allow us to submit. We also have this Masakene initiative. It's important that I have links there. It's important that you join. That's one of the efforts that we make to bring African NLP to light. And some of the things we've done in Masakane. And finally, so there is also what we call the Lacuna Fund, which was introduced last year. If you have something you are doing with building data and data sets for languages, it might be a good place for you to also apply for funding. All right. And I mean, that should be it. Then in conclusion, we are calling everybody to join. And I'm sorry I had to race through this because the moment I saw how much time I have, I kind of derailed a bit. So anyway, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I learned a lot from a lot of people. Thank you for the patience to allow me to get through this. Thank you.
Yeah, we are so sorry for putting you under so much pressure. So sorry about that.
I don't think it's all about you. I think.
All right. Thank you so much for that interest.
Go on.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your time. We really appreciate you. Yes. Thank you for another very interesting talk. I was particularly when I listened to your profile about the fact that you're working on Igbo English machine translation. I think that's so cool. And thank you very much for the talk once again. Thank you for telling us that NLP is a subfield of AI. I think NLP is neuro linguistic programming also.
No, NLP is natural language processing. So well, there's NLP, that's neuro linguistic programming as well. But the one we're talking about today is natural language.
Oh, okay, processing. I see that. Natural language processing. Okay, I think I needed to make that clear so that we know what exactly we are dealing with. Natural language processing. So, and it's also interesting to be reminded that AI is not just about sci-fi anymore. So now you have AI serving, machine serving in restaurants and all those things, serving in hotels and everywhere. So thank you for the definition about AI also as being the synthesis and analysis of computational agents that act rationally. So, and also you told us about the hierarchy of NLP now, from AI, artificial intelligence, to machine learning, to deep learning, and that natural language processing is about the computational processing of human languages, such that we can have understanding, so that there can be understanding between machines and humans, so to speak. Now, in globalization, you told us that we should leverage our our indigenous languages, so that we can have a place in the ongoing globalization, and I think that's very important. So we saw the applications too, and it's pathetic that most of them are not properly captured in our indigenous languages. But then all hope is not lost, because thankfully we have the African NLP workshop. So if they won't invite us, if they won't invite us to the table, we have to be their own table. Like, I'm grateful that that is going on. And for the Masakane initiative and the Lacuna Fund, I think we are very grateful that it's just a matter of time before we take our rightful place in the scheme of things when it comes to natural language processing. Thank you so much, Dr. Ignatius Ezeani, for the great talk. So I'll hand over now to Augustine for the questions.
Thank you.
Once again, I thank Emmanuel as well as our speakers. Especially we have been able to discover more than even what we have actually discussed, even during some of the preliminary discussion. And we have chats discussion going on in the chat room, and some people are really applauding the comments that was made with regards to how Africans are not actually using their languages. And our speakers has also made us to realize that it's not just about preserving cultural heritage, as Dr. Adegbola made it to realize that it would form to a form of digital colonization. And the questions, part of the questions that came up will be from, or comments will be from Fellaini Kayetono, who says, excellent point. There are few texts in my language, Garifuna, and the churches have their own version of their Bible readily available, which contribute to erasure of traditional practice that they don't believe or approve of. And the Yokiam also made comment that in her work, she also tried to, in her project, even though she's writing English, she tried to put proverbs. There's a question from Francis Chiadi, which goes like this. Is the USA English advantage in computer programming a fiat company? What is the value of mastering a classic language like Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic? Is machine coding and artificial intelligence? So that's just a question he put. And Yokiam asks the question, can a nation have a technological philosophy if it imports majority of its products? And how he has a question to the speakers, which has to do with the effort they have made in their research to actually incorporate indigenous language as well as data sets into to a form that is codable, or into something that can work on with textual analysis, technology and tools. So I just want to find out, what are the other things you expect to be done in this regard, as we have young scholars who are also interested in advancing this course. So thank you very much. I think the speakers can help us to take those questions as they see fit.
Okay, I think I should take the technology philosophy question. And that's a very wonderful question. A country that is a consumer of everything tech, like we are not producing, right? We consume a lot. We may not be able to say this is our technology philosophy, because countries that have been able to define their technology philosophy, they are countries where they consume 80% of the tech products they produce themselves. You know, so the problem with us in Africa, I usually say that the problem in Africa is not lack of innovators. We have a lot of innovators, but the arrangement and the organization of our innovation has been done poorly in such a way that we are not able to bring together all the innovation efforts together. And that is what a lot of innovation ecosystem research is focusing on now. How to consolidate all the distributed innovation effort all across Africa. Yes, not scaled, so it's not well organized. So our problem is not lack of innovators, but the organization of the innovation structure. So we cannot have a technology philosophy when we have such a system where everything is scattered, and also the support we should give to our innovators and developers of new technologies is not enough, right? In South Korea, for example, from the data I read, they consume 80% of their own technology. When you go to South Korea, you just see Benz and BMW just scantily. They drive their Kia vehicles, they drive their ande, they drive their Daewoo's, So, and those are the things you can, identify as the foundational issue with forming a technology philosophy. And until we settle that, we may not be able to pinpoint a particular philosophy in Africa that is technological.
Well, let me speak to the question that asked about the value of speaking, learning languages like Latin and all these other languages. Fundamentally, a language is basically a window to the world. Every language that you speak gives you an insight into the world. It's like you are looking into a room through one window. There are certain things you will not see in a room if you are looking through a window. But if you look through another window into that room, you will see other things that you didn't see before. And that is the way language behaves. So no language is inferior or superior to the other. The value of a language is bestowed on it solely by the people who use it. So if a people declare the language as not important, then the language remains unimportant. If a people take their language as important, then the language is important. Now, when we now say that a language is like a window to the world, what we are saying is there are different ways of looking at the world. And every new language that you learn makes you a lot more comfortable about the world. And that's the value of learning other languages. Once you have more than one language, you see that you have an appreciation of the world that is a lot better than those who speak only one language. Let me also talk quickly about this issue of a technology philosophy. Let me start by saying language itself is a technology. Why do we say language is a technology? What is technology? Technology is the application of natural principles to improve the human condition. And language, by virtue of the way it works, both in writing or in speech, are basically exploitation of natural principles to improve the human condition. How are we doing that? As I'm speaking to you, all I'm doing is I'm taking in air into my lungs, and I am letting out the air under controlled situations that make me create certain sounds that have been given social value, to the extent that certain sounds mean certain things. So when a people import all the products that they use, also import their language, then you see that there's a problem. Because it means, therefore, they will not have a technology policy, and as a knock-on effect, they will not even have a language policy. Today, Nigeria does not have a language policy. And we have been told that a lack of a policy is actually a policy that anything goes. And you know that anything that is not organized is bound to fail. So these are the things we will consider when we look at language, when we look at technology, and when we look at this whole thing about importing all our products and about having a philosophy for our technology, or even philosophy for language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We're indeed so grateful. And Dr. Ezeani, do you have any remarks to the questions that were raised?
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity again. First, I want to address a quick one about the issue of biases that are built into the systems that we build today. And I gave an example of bias in gender, for instance, but it could be in any other thing. So it could be racial bias or so on and so on. And the question was, how do we mitigate that? Well, one is that the language, the systems we build mimic what we see in the way we use language. So these things are here. In research, what we do, because I just go basically to how we handle some of these things technically, what we do is to try again to be conscious of that, create data sets that will help us to test whatever we have built to make sure that it does not, well, reproduce these biases as we see it. For instance, if we train an embedding model, as I showed you, and try to test that embedding model on how it understands what we're doing, and it matches women to homemaking and men to maybe engineering and so on, we know that it's not working very well. We have to adjust our parameters and retrain anyway. So that's what we're doing, and the research is still ongoing on that. These are some of the things that will make it possible or impossible for you to assess, for instance, credit in the UK or some other place. You do not know what the system actually considers when it looks at your own profile, and therefore decide not to give you, but give somebody else who is actually at higher risk to pay back. Issue of technology philosophy is a very good point, very well made by the speakers. The other thing I want to, I mean, more like a friendly suggestion is that, you know, we are already behind in this race, and we may decide to keep reinventing the wheel again, redoing everything that everybody has done in the past, or we may coast along. Striking a balance is what I think we should try to do. By that, I mean that it should be a approach where we are advocating and hoping that those who lead us will be guided properly to define policies and philosophies that will help these things to work. We'll also be as destructive as we can locally, build small communities like we are doing, but I'm sure like this research network we are on now, we create that and also grow. So instead of a top-bottom approach, we do bottom-up approach as well. So that if we meet along the way, that's fine. If that helps the leaders think about these things differently, that would be excellent. But the way our leaders work in Africa, if we wait for them to come at some point and create a policy that allows this to happen, then we're not going to do anything at all. And at the end of the day, indeed, I believe that IT, AI gives us better opportunity than some of the physical commodities that we have, which we haven't developed very well. Okay, so we keep an open mind about this and approach it from different sides and see what works. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ignatius. I'm just going to assist in the question and answer section, and I just want to encourage everyone, if you have at some point you have something to submit, you have a submission, or you have something that you want to say and to the group, just indicate by raising your hand or unmute yourself, and then you'll be given the floor to speak. And I'm just really I've taken a lot from the presentations of today from our different speakers. I just want to say a big thank you to Dr. Adegbola, to Dr. Adepoju, and to Dr. Ignatius for the very wonderful sessions that they had. And you know, one of the questions that came to my heart, to my mind as the presentation went on. And I just want to have, I don't know, firstly, I think I'm going to direct the question to Dr. Adegbola, but I think I'm going to also have the other speakers coming in, because I think, like Dr. Ignatius was saying just then, a matter of reinventing the wheel, and we don't want to, perhaps we don't want to do that, but we want to sort of find a way in which we can adapt things. And one of the things that Dr. Adegbola mentioned, I think towards the end of his presentation, was on how we can widen the domain, or that we need to widen the domain of use of our indigenous languages. And as Austin was reading earlier, I think Yoknum was saying that she tries to do that by incorporating, things like maybe the proverbs, or things like precepts that are from her local language, or whatever local language, or whatever indigenous language that she's acquainted with, and she's introducing that in her own her own writings or her own work. And my main question is what are effective ways to do this, or to widen the domain of use of these languages to the point where they can actually sort of be useful in terms of advancement in technology, or in terms of how they help the lives of people. Like Dr. Adepoju was saying, when I think was talking about in a Japanese community where the primary language of use is the Japanese one, and English is just a secondary sort of backup language. How can we incorporate that in a place like, for example, I don't know, Nigeria or whatever countries are in need of this kind of talk that we're having? And I see Uti's hand up. I'll bring you in after some of these responses.
Did you say I should speak on this?
Yes, please, sir. Then other speakers too can join in.
Yeah, the question is, how do we widen the domains of use of our
usage?
languages?
Yes.
Fundamentally, it comes from the value we put on our languages. If we start with the inferiority complex, that our languages are not adequate, our languages are not smart enough, our languages are not cannot be used to teach science and technology, then we have started on a wrong footing. We've started on a fallacy, and everything else we do is built on that. Every language that human beings use is a naturally evolving phenomenon determined by the conditions of the human mind. And whatever the human mind can conceive, the human language can express. But language is like a living being in which what you feed it with will determine the way it grows. So if you starve your language of science and technology, then it will not grow in the direction of science and technology. So basically, the way to go forward is to have a total rethink about the importance of our languages. You will notice, if you look, we did a study some 10 years ago, and we discovered that every language, every country in the world that uses its language to teach its children science and technology has achieved industrial breakthrough. And every country in the world that uses a foreign language to teach science and technology has not achieved industrial breakthrough. One or two exceptions. Singapore is probably the only country in the world that taught science and technology to its children and was able to achieve industrial breakthrough. And probably Ethiopia is the only country that teaches science and technology to its children in their own language, and they have not made exceptional industrial breakthrough. They are not lagging behind, but they have not done. So that tells you that there's something fundamental about using your language to do things. Imagine that a child goes to school, and for the first 1 year, he is still learning the language in which he's going to learn. And when parents react to that, they say, if I want to give my children a head start, then let me start speaking English to them at home so that when they get to school, they won't have to, first of all, learn English. And people now send their children to so-called nursery schools and kindergarten where they do A for apple and become estranged from the environment. And they understand, they know all this A for apple, but understand nothing. So these are some of the problems that we have. I mean, one of my PhD students that wrote her PhD thesis on the computational morphology of the Igbo language. I made her to do a PhD because she said in a master's class that we cannot subject our languages to NLP treatments. And I said I wouldn't allow her to graduate from the University of Ibadan thinking that with a master's degree, thinking that way. And that delayed her for another 5 years to get a PhD. She probably didn't plan to get a PhD, but that was how I punished her for thinking that way. These are the kind of radical positions we should take about the way our languages are treated. Every language is valuable, every language is capable, but like I said, every language becomes what you feed it with. And we have to ensure that we feed our languages with the right menu, the right diet.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I think at this point, let me bring in Uchi to give a submission, and then we can have other input from the panelists.
Thank you very much, Rina. It has indeed been a fantastic, fantastically inspiring session. I am just so happy to have been part of the audience. And mine is more like partially a question, partially a comment. And with respect to the comments that the Prof just made about, language and conceptualization, I want to start with two proverbs in my language, which is Ibibio, and I'm going to translate immediately. So the first one says, and it means that the termite uses sand. If it wants to climb to the sky, it cannot. It uses sand as the technology for climbing to the sky, because with pulling the sand from the earth, it can use that as a structure that then enables it to climb. And then the second proverb says, meaning that when the owner of the house says it is a shanty place, then the neighbor can just put, set it ablaze and say, what? You said it was a shanty. So why I'm making reference to these two proverbs is that, Professor, you spoke about linguistic gas flaring. And it is my understanding that there is so much in terms of knowledge forms, philosophies, ideologies of meaning, contextualization of our environment that are embedded in our indigenous languages that have been sadly lost and are getting more and more lost every day because of the inability to access these languages. And then the second presenter asked the important question, what is the relationship with the indigenous, our relationship with the indigenous languages? So my question then is, to what extent do you think the educational, say we take Nigeria as a case study, the educational system needs to adapt if we are to achieve all these high goals and ideals of bringing, say, Nigeria, for example, again, into the technological paradigm that will enable all these things that we're talking about to happen? Would it still function with this context of having this disconnect between what children learn in school and what their actual reality at home is, because of the difference between the language of instruction and their view of the indigenous languages? What do you think? Do you think there needs to be anything that happens in order to ensure that there is a connect between these fields of knowledge?
Is that question for me or for the other speakers?
Yeah, Professor, you might take a stab at it
Let
because
me allow the
it
other
is
speakers
inspired
to
by most
speak.
of what you said, and then if
Yeah,
there are
let me allow
insights.
the other speakers to speak, and if there is enough time, I will say something after.
Okay.
Okay, can I weigh in a little bit?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't. My specialty is not in, understanding the deep structures of language as it is. We still treat language in the way I practice as data that fits into a system and what comes out at the other end. However, what I've always, and I might be wrong, is that I think Prof captured it a little bit better than I would have. This concept of gas flaring is what because I'm very reluctant in waiting on the government or any kind of political structure to determine what will happen. We haven't yet come up to thinking in that way, and we can't wait for too long because as we wait, things move on. Okay, so the question will be, yes, we do not document most of these things we do in our languages. We speak them, but we don't document them. And is there a way we will exploit them somehow in building technologies that will serve the people? In Nigeria, for instance, children, like Prof said, communicate with their parents. As I speak with my parents all the time in our language, and our sister just spoke her language. This is the way we communicate. And there are, technology has enabled it to another level. For instance, if you do a voice note on WhatsApp to somebody, it's sometimes a convenient way for people to just basically express themselves rather than typing. And I know that a lot of the time with people close to me, I do that in Igbo language, all right? And we have a lot of this kind of things on YouTube and so on because our tradition now, our culture, actually captures a lot of spoken rather than written language, right? So if we have systems that can process this, we can harness it without really looking at revamping the structure as it is now, and build systems that will support market women, children in poor areas, or people who really cannot speak English very well to feel comfortable expressing themselves in bargaining for vegetable in the market and so on, or talking to other people. We haven't even talked about enabling the disabled. I mean, a lot of people cannot even see and look at these things that we are writing. So here, the blind people can listen to their devices, but they speak English to them. What about the blind guy that speaks only Yoruba or understands only Yoruba? So we can use a lot of these resources that are oral or audio or video that are existing, and use that to augment what we are building for Igbo, depending when we can have properly structured textual contents for building our systems. That's the way I'm looking at it. That way we'll begin to disrupt the system a little bit. I don't know how to get the government of today to actually embed this in their policies. I don't know, really, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this point, we have exceeded the time for today's session. And some questions are still coming in. And I think I'm just going to share to the general group the WhatsApp number so that we can be able to continue there, as well as other links. You can just click on that. And then I'll make a few announcements with regards to our coming events while I thank the speaker, and we close for today. So I will just quickly do that. For our coming events, we're going to have next month, as usual, our webinar on the second Saturday of the month, and we're having decolonizing theology as a topic with Professor Beckford and Dr. Patrick Feishito, Father Feishito, and then we have in May, COVID-19, mental health care and African classical music, and to see how African classical music cures mental health issues that is becoming rampant in this COVID era. And then we're going to in June to have a series, or the first session of a series on African institutional transformation, which part of the issues that were raised here with regards to language will also come up. And then in July, we're going to have the question of superiority of race. And I could hear Doctor talking about some people feeling inferior about their language. So these are some of the things that is going to be addressed from European positionality, from Freter, and as well as Dr. Kwame. And then in August, we're going to have a discussion on Western and African feminism. I want to really look at it. Are they the same concept and the same interest? And experts across board will address that. So on this note, I really want to thank the speakers. I really want to thank all the participants, and I hope that we share the video with you and we have further conversation. Thank you very much and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Dr. Emmanuel, thank you very much. Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Yeah, thanks.